Welcome back to Tea and Stuff. I'm here with my good friend, John Shiloh. He is I'm not sure whether you would go as a potter, a ceramist, um, uh, an artist of the earthenwares. But I always seem to call you either John or Shiloh. First of all, I guess I'll let you take over your introduction well, hold on a second. I should give you, I've known you longer than almost anyone in the tea world. Like as soon as I tuned into the Gong Fu station, you literally were right there. And it's been super interesting for not only you to have seen my journey come up, but it's been super cool for me to see this parallel journey that you've been on. There's been times where we were both learning about the same thing. There's times when you were learning about this, I was learning about that, and then we would often come and meet in the middle. But I mean, you have traveled to the places of origin. You've studied from people that have been doing this as a trade forever. So I mean, like I said, I call you John, I call you Shiloh, I call you my friend. But I guess start off with, I guess, how you like to be, the name you prefer, and then take on your introduction from there.
Thank you, my friend. It's great to be here with you, and I concur that that you are one of the first tea friends that I came into contact with from not only period but from the United States as well, who had a deep love for everything, not just Gong Fu cha, but also pertaining to the practice of understanding teas across Japan, across Taiwan. You were my introduction to Taiwanese teas as well. So it's been wonderful to witness kind of this journey of both artistry and also curatorship of teas, refining your palate in conjunction with getting in touch with some wonderful people and sharing the stories of everyone. That's been very much a part of your journey and also a part of my journey, because I get it because you share that with everyone. So the generosity that you've shown also has extended into my education and everyone else's education. So first of all, thank you for that, Jeff.
Thank you for that. That was very, very kind. So yeah, you were a potter before you were really into tea, right?
Yes, precisely. So
when did you get into pottery? How'd that happen?
And also to address your initial questions, sorry about that. I prefer to be just called Shiloh. That's just my standard. Although I do go by J Shiloh on my Instagram handle, which is Nuev NUEV underscore Orden ORDEN, which essentially means new order in Spanish, which has to do with a new mindset of wanting to share amidst a world that perhaps is a bit too insular for some. The new order is wanting to share. So that's the meaning behind my name. And on Instagram.
I did not know that. Awesome.
Yeah. So I thought I would share that too, because that is an important facet. But yes, in 2009, I had been studying painting and sculpting over the last 10 years or so. Well, roughly 6 years onward to 10. And then I went to get my bachelor's at the University of the Pacific, but all the painting courses had been shifted around for the entire academic year. So I took on so I met the ceramics instructor who had been a painter. He introduced me to ceramics. His name is Trent Burkett. And he, over the course of the next year, we went to different spots in California, Pope Valley, and several other locations to wood fire pottery, and essentially living out in very rural areas, chopping wood And there's something very special. It's hard to explain when you're sitting in front of a kiln and you're kindling the wood and you're seeing the flame start from just a very small little smokestack, eventually emerging into this roaring flame. And you hear the breath of the kiln when it's being pulled through the entire body of the kiln. It feels like it's alive almost. And it was at
Oh
that
yeah.
point when I looked into the kiln that I realized that this practice, it kindled something deep within me to want to create and to want to explore this process. And that's when I knew I wanted to become a ceramicist, but I also very much focused on pottery and
So
tea wares.
what is the difference between ceramics, pottery, like what defines each one?
Well, oh, and if you don't mind, I'll begin to heat my teaware as well.
Oh yeah, go for it.
So ceramics, and specifically when you hear the term clay, it's referring to raw clay. And and then when you hear ceramic, it's referring to actual fired finished pottery. So in and of itself, that term, when you hear ceramics, it can refer to sculpture. It can refer to installation art, which is making actually filling an environment. If you think of Banksy, how he fills an entire space, perhaps even if you think of Ai Weiwei, how he filled an entire museum with ceramic seeds. You know, it's anything that's meant to evoke strong emotions and fill a space that can be ceramic installation. So think anything involving sculpture or handmade art can fall under the category of ceramic. So it's a very broad category. Anything within the arts pertaining to the medium of fired clay. And then pottery is very much the utilitarian manifestation or the categorical um, um, application of the handmade piece, of a piece that's crafted for use so that people can eat food, can drink out of it, and essentially utilitarian in the sense that it's meant to be a vessel for an act of service.
Hmm.
That and so that we're able to serve each other, or to feed ourselves, or to feed others, or to drink, or to nourish others. And that's one of the main things that drew me to the medium, was that I wasn't just making something to be appreciated for its beauty, but also that it was meant for people to use every day. And every time they used it, they thought about their contact with me or their contact with anyone else who was there at that time. It serves as kind of a placeholder for experience. And so that in and of itself is what drew me to the communal aspect within the ceramics world, which is on par with the tea community when it comes to it, because multiple people, when you're firing a wood kiln, you need someone to chop the wood, someone to bring it, someone to stoke the kiln by putting the wood into the kiln. You need someone to bring the shelves. It's you need so many people, and there's so many hands involved, that it is a multifaceted experience requiring teamwork. And so that is one reason why pottery, acts of service, extends not just to the use of the object, but the preparation in making the object as well.
When I got into Gong Fu, and I found out about a very talented artist in my area, Sean, Great Wheel Studios, he has his own wood fire kiln. And as I'm just learning about tea and teaware and the finer aspects of tea, and you know, I'm under full understanding that some teapots will be inexpensive, some will be very expensive. If an artist is hand making it, it's obviously going to be more expensive. But I would still see some works of teaware and I would just go, no offense, and I love tea and teaware, but I was like, I don't quite understand why that teapot is worthy of that price. And you know, people would tell you, well, it's the, you know, it's, again, it's how it's made, it's how it's fired, it's what it took to fire, and you're like, you still don't, I still didn't have the real applicable grasp of it until he invited me to film a little and hang out and oversee what the wood firing process is like. And I'll tell you, after seeing all the work that goes into it, the uh, um, draw that you make, the Russian roulette draw you make each time you put something in the wood fire kiln, because it is not too unoften that something explodes or breaks or falls, and then, you know, due to the delicateness of them when they're hot, will break other things around it. So it's almost like you got to treat almost every piece that comes out of a wood fire kiln as a survivor to some degree.
That's very eloquently said, and also Sean indicated that very succinctly through his actions, I'm sure. And the danger, and really one of the reasons why we undertake the wood fire kiln process, in addition to it being one of the older forms before we had gas, before we had electricity, we would utilize wood as our main source, or coal as well, and oil. But wood had the unique effect of depositing the ash. The ash would actually burn up, and the fires would actually, and also the flue or the air from the chimney would actually come into the kiln, lift the flames up, and the ash would be essentially reduced to a liquid, or like it would actually be placed and it would be heated, and then it would evaporate upward, carried by the flame and the air, and deposited as it passes through the pots. It's depositing ash. But in the process of doing that, the temperature, in order to melt the ash, so that way it becomes part of the pot and it turns into a glaze. So something akin to this, in order for it to become glossy, for it to melt, it actually needs extreme heat. And in the process of heating that pottery, it actually can warp the pottery. And a teapot that's been wood fired, a normal pot in a gas kiln would take a total of maybe, it would fire for maybe 12 hours. Depending on the size of the kiln, it could take 1 or 2. It would be surprising if it took a full day. It might even take 2 if it's a larger kiln, but a wood kiln, they typically have long chambers with over 1,000 pots, very large area. And because of that, the heat work of the actual fire itself is extended over a longer period of time. And that's sustained heat to melt the ash and to bring out those earthy colors that so represent the beauty of wood-fired work, also act as a detriment at times by warping them and simultaneously causing the glaze to run and causing the piece to adhere to the shelf. And perhaps you lose a foot when you try to pull it off of the shelf, or perhaps the glaze on the inside runs and covers the small sieve holes, the small filter holes. And there are so many things that could go wrong in the process of wood firing that we, the potters, we, the ceramicists, have to fine tune the process to ensure that each piece has the best chance of survival. But in the truest sense, a wood fire kiln is a very chemically volatile space until it's completely fired. Everything cools, then you have the result. The ones that manage to survive the process are the ones that normally, let's say you have 10 teapots that would have survived in a much gentler gas kiln with even heat. But with a wood kiln, out of 10, I would be happy if I got 6 out of 10 that were not complete, that didn't have some small issue that might affect the function or would affect the aesthetic if a piece of it didn't have to be ground off. So you risk losing at least half of your work, possibly, depending upon if it were hit with a very, if it were hit with high heat. So that's why wood-fired work tends to cost a little bit, or even in some cases exorbitantly more.
Well, it's not even, the problem doesn't just stop at physical damage to the cup. There's also, like you said, because of the heat and how it just chooses to distribute itself around and throw that ash around, you have no idea what exactly the glaze or it could come out and have magnificent colors and cracks and all these beautiful things, or it can come out looking like you literally just put it in a fire. There's so much. It's not just like a physical breakage. It's also maybe the intended look that the artist had. Well, I guess almost you would go into it if you're an artist, one of the artists making stuff. You would know going into the wood firing that you'd know you'd know what you were dealing with.
No, that's extremely true. That is extremely well said too, because what we intend is rarely what occurs within a wood kiln. We have more control within a gas and electric kiln because the firing, the heat distribution within the chamber is very even. And the kiln and the burners that we use are designed to do just that. And the uneven atmosphere and the heat distribution is one of the key features as to why the pottery is so, we get such evocative colors. Sometimes we get purple, gold, cerulean, all on one pot. And we get this rainbow effect of all these diverse ranges of color. And some are very bright and some are so earthy, you look like you pulled them out of the earth because the ash didn't quite melt. And even that can be a beautiful effect. That has become the hallmark of Japanese and Chinese wood firing, that has then spread to other parts of Asia, is this look as though it were rough hewn out of the earth. And so that look, that wabi sabi, that idea of the elegant roughness, the natural aesthetic of earth, that feels as though it was, the potter may have made the form, but the work really is finished by the kiln, by the heat. And that philosophical notion is one of the reasons why sometimes we sacrifice our work, because the process, we need that little push from the kiln to achieve that look. And part of that possible loss is one of the reasons why we do it, is it's worth it if we get something that's wholly unique and looks as though it were a collaboration between potter and fire, as though because really the kiln is like the painter. It paints each pot in flame and ash. So I think, so many potters think of wood fire as a form of collaboration between themselves and nature. Yeah.
It really, when you get into the deeper meanings of tea and you get into like once you get to the whole intention side of tea, that's when, if it hasn't hit you already, these types of notions of why things like a piece of teaware, why that piece of teaware may cost more, is it's not just that it went in and just to a different type of kiln, that it went through a lot and its own little journey before it even started with yours. So it was, so sitting in on it, it was, and I popped by, I think, for 2 days of it, maybe 2 separate days, but it was just, and then the stoking, that not only do you have to keep feeding the fire, but the preciseness that you even have to throw the logs with, you have to know where they're going in there, because if you throw a renegade piece in there, you could upset a lot of artists.
That is so true. Oh, I could tell you some horror stories where someone who, with the best of intentions, wanted to get a wood next to their pots to get like the primo ash. They
Hmm.
like slid it in and it knocked over like someone else's pot and it fell on its side. And after the firing was done, it was adhered to the kiln shelf. And thank goodness it, after it was, we used a little, we actually used a chisel and a hammer to gently break off the melted glaze and the ash glaze. And
Yeah.
then we just ground it down and it looked absolutely beautiful, that one spot. So that's the other aspect of it, is with skill and time, eventually the wood fire potter can work that into the aesthetic, not just the kiln itself, but the seeming mistakes as well. It's all part of the tapestry of achieving a finished effect. You're literally telling the story of both the successes and the mistakes. But I could tell you horror stories where someone threw in a piece of wood and they knocked over a whole, like a whole stilt that was holding up a shelf, and a whole shelf fell on top of another shelf. So there are times, as you said, that that way, if it's your first time, really ensure that you practice where there aren't pots, and then eventually graduate to where there are pots, so that way you can know where to place it in. And if you notice when I'm making this motion, when you take a piece of wood, you're using very thin pieces of wood, very thin, because the actual stoking hole sometimes is maybe that big or maybe that big. So you're putting a very small piece of wood just to get concentrated ash into that specific region of the kiln. And it's at various points over the course of the kiln. And if you notice, I'm doing it with one finger or with
Hmm.
two, because that's the amount of pressure that you use. It's literally like almost sliding a feather in. But once it goes in, if you're dealing with a little cup or a little teapot that's that big, that's all it takes is that amount of motion to knock it off of the shelf. So that in itself is an art form. Every element of it requires intention to ensure that that you're not only caring for your own work, but for everyone else's work too.
So yeah, so if anyone who's listening doesn't, didn't know why a wood fire piece may or may not cost more, hopefully these little stories help shed a little light on that. It's such a crazy, it's such a simple thing that has such complexities in it, much like everything in tea and a lot of things in life. How long after getting into the teaware aspect of pottery or ceramics did you then head over to China to study there?
Mm, good question. It was essentially, I had studied I had studied the basics on how to make ceramics from 2009 to 2012. And then 2013, I did an apprenticeship in Kentucky where I learned how to make production pottery at Terra Cottage Ceramics with Michael and Victoria Terra. And those are two wonderful people. If you want to see someone who makes his living making ceramics in the old fashioned manner and doing very well, and you want to see a beautiful Victorian home, they are two wonderful people to look into. I'm just going to plug two wonderful individuals there.
If I don't remember to get a link from you or something like that, and you people are watching and hear this, just comment if I haven't, and we'll get you their contact info. No, I was, as you were saying it, I was like, oh no, this is worthy of a plug.
Thank you, my friend. No, that would be great. And feel free to reach out to me, friends, too. But yes, and so Michael really taught me about kind of his work is more whimsical. So that taught me how to make many pots. And I was learned how to use text. I learned how to be more sculptural. I learned how to hand build with more grace and efficiency, making eggshell thin pottery, where like I was making a tall cup that was this tall, but it was paper thin. I learned immense delicacy while still, because of the height, because of it being fired, it had a strength to it. So that was kind of, once I did that, I said, I want to continue the journey. I want to continue to delve into this. Now that I know how to make a living at it as well, being a production ceramicist, I can also do that if I so wish. And then I thought, I still want to teach though. That was one of the key facets, is I wanted to teach this. And I wanted to not just teach ceramics, but I wanted to teach other things pertaining to the arts. So, but it still felt like there was a piece missing. There was something not quite there. And so I ended up going to the National Council on Education for the Ceramic Arts, known as NCECA, NCECA, and went from Kentucky to Houston, Texas. And at that point, I to state it in a more abridged fashion, learned about the Oregon College of Art and Craft. And from the period of 2013 fall to about roughly 2016 May or so, I attended the Oregon College of Art and Craft, and I learned about Japanese tea wares, and more specifically the amacha chawan. And I was very devoted to this idea of making a vessel that was, that for one thing, it's a bowl that is a little wider than the average cup. It's actually wider than it is tall. So you'll see that it's not quite as tall as it is. And what's wonderful about this is, even though your tea gets cold, the main facet of it is you hold it up to your face, and your nose goes into it, your mouth goes into it, and your eyes even, you see the beautiful color of the matcha or the tea leaf, and you engage 100%. And at that point, I realized tea wares were where I wanted to take things. And that's where I connected with sharing tea with people, is handing them a bowl of tea was, I could see like when they tasted their tea, and all of a sudden they went from to,
Yeah.
that was a wonderful feeling, where I suddenly realized that though it's a small act, this act led me to some of the most wonderful people who were connected to residencies, and where I could teach, and where I could show appreciation for the tea that we shared. And then they said, would you like to come, and would you like to teach a workshop, or would you like to just share tea every week and talk about life? And so there was this natural flow that was not predicated on anything. It was completely was a completely natural flow that led to additional conversations with other people. And I enjoyed that so much that when I went to my sixth NCECA in roughly 2017, and I met Jackson Lee, who is the head of Sanbao Studio. And Jackson is in Jingdezhen, which is the porcelain capital of China. I say that because there's porcelain capitals in many parts of Asia and Europe, and to a degree the United States even. And so, and Jackson and I felt this connection to each other because of our love of tea. And while at OCAC, Oregon College of Art and Craft, I met Jonathan Steele, who introduced me to Gong Fu Cha, introduced me to using smaller teapots to a larger amount of leaf, introduced me to the rich tea community in Oregon and the wood fire potters. And I fell in love with it because the Japanese tea service was nice, just to hand things out and to enjoy tea between two people or several people, but it lacked it didn't lack, but it was a different format from the Chinese Gong Fu Cha, where it's very conversational and it can be very formal, or it can be very or it can be very socially diverse. And I've learned even that Japanese tea service can be that as well. And there's many facets of it through drinking, through drinking sencha, having a senchado, like an actual sencha ceremony. So there are many ways in which to enjoy. So, but at the time I didn't know that. And I learned that as a result of Gongfu Cha in China. And so, as you can see, essentially, it opened this world up to me of tea service across multiple cultures. And so, Jonathan was my introduction to that. And again, I will make another plug for Jonathan Steele. So, Steele Tea Studios. And again, I'll just kind of keep it to those two. I think, or you understand though, Jonathan, wonderful teapot maker. Be sure to check out his work as well. And so wood fire at that too, very, very difficult to make. Jonathan taught me. And it was through that association that then he introduced me to other tea makers. And I went on to realize there's a technical element to making good tea for people. And that led me to Don May, which is a good friend to many of us. Don has been one of the forerunners when it comes to tea education. I watched his master classes from the time they first began appearing on YouTube. And Don is just, and Don was kind of my introduction to the technical aspects of tea.
Back when it was China Life, right?
Yes, exactly. Yep. It wasn't even called Mayleaf yet. It was called China Life. Yep. So, and this was back in 2016. Yeah. So, Don has been airing so many educational resources for us to learn about the technical, the historical, and also the philosophical elements of tea, and also what each teaware does. And so my technical knowledge emerged to a degree, what I learned from other tea makers and potters, but Don was the one who handled it from a scientific viewpoint that helped me to add additional credence to the technical aspects of it. And I studied that for about a year. Then I ran into Jackson Lee. And so that was kind of the start of that conversation. And I just want to make sure, were you about to say something, Jeff?
Or? Oh, no. I was just nodding in agreement.
Okay. I want to be sure, because I'm sure we could talk about Don on several topics. But yes, also Mayleaf. Be sure to check Mayleaf. But and it's MEI, which means plum. Yeah.
It would be really hard. I think most people that are into Gong Fu right now, they're like active in the communities that are out there right now for tea. I think you'd be pretty hard pressed to find somebody that wasn't at least a little inspired or didn't learn something from Don in their upbringing. Like
I would, yeah. No, like, I agree with you.
If you searched YouTube back then, if you searched Gong Fu tea, you would get either a Mayleaf video or you would get a non-dubbed Chinese video of like tea production.
Precisely.
Which isn't bad, but it's just if you were an American person who had no knowledge on Mandarin, between the two, obviously you're like, well, Mayleaf's a little easier to understand, very digestible.
Oh, that's true. And that was the strength of it, is there wasn't many online resources available at that time. There really weren't. I had to really search, and I had to research articles. And that's the way it's been for many, many decades. And it wasn't until Don really started to share those educational resources and make them more digestible for the beginner and create overviews for the intermediate and advanced Gong Fu Cha practitioner. As much as Don has grown, at the core of it, he's really been making Gong Fu Cha more digestible. So he's a good place to start. And then from that point, you can begin to expand and explore. So that's what I appreciated about Don is his educational appreciation and the way that he simplifies and makes it. He shows you how to integrate Gong Fu Cha into everyday life.
People have
And
zero
so,
idea how immensely hard it is to just on any topic in a true presentation style that doesn't feel robotic, present material to someone. It is I try to do it, and there's so many struggles, and I know he has, like, a lot of people, you see his videos and how seamless he does it, and it really does seem like for him it must kind of just be as easy as just switching on the camera. But I 99.9% guarantee you that he would say no. Every single video, there's headaches, there's redos, he has to, in the middle of talking about something, has to stop, pause, and restart. It's very difficult, but he does it. And beyond, I'll even talk about outside of tea, just presenting really rich, deep, cavernous information in that way and make it that digestible is like an X-Men power. Like it's truly incredible. It really is. It's incredible. And then for him to be as what I think just as down to earth and easy to contact and easy to talk to a person as he is, it's like he was bred to do this.
yeah, yes, I mean, I concur is that we often don't give credit when we see the finished product without seeing the work that went into it and the years of dedication. His father bringing tribute tea back to Don, and Don going to China to learn about it, to add to China life, and to, and working with like his father being so involved with bringing Chinese culture to the United States, and him feeling a responsibility to represent that in a way that is true but also digestible. It's not easy, and mistakes will be made. But Don, I think he has done so with a sense of grace for the most part. And he has, I think we all have our moments when we try to bring it to the public. We'll all inherently, like try, our translations across cultures don't always hit home. But I think that if we take into account how much work and effort and time it takes to do that, then we can come to a better understanding that in the end, as long as we're having the discussion about where we can improve, I think that's the most important thing. And Don has been very transparent when it comes to the discussion on wanting to improve wherever there could be a means to do so. And I am appreciative to him of even starting that conversation as well. Yeah.
It's just and then the other thing is that think about all of the, and myself, I'm sure yourself included, all the people that then got into doing tea education themselves, or people that were already in the tea industry, already doing it, or already like part of it. They saw what he was doing and how people, if you break it down right, people really can understand these like in-depth topics of Gong Fu. So it made other people sort of look at it and go, okay, yeah, maybe I can do this. And now, like, you look at it today and holy geez, you search YouTube for Gong Fu Cha or Gong Fu Tea, and you'll see creators of all different languages, different styles, different. Oh, it's insane. So it's built to something really, really beautiful. And you're right. I would have to say that it's pretty undeniable that he is one of the most key people in that movement.
Yeah, no, that's true. And not to necessarily blow him up into this larger than life figure. The whole point of this is to indicate that anyone can teach it. Anyone can. That's really the point of this education, is to say this is one format that anyone can champion. And in and of itself, it's the wanting to share the social aspects of tea. And there's multiple ways to make this digestible without going into a diatribe about the history of this tea. You could literally talk for for several months only about tea from Ansi County. You know what I mean? So there's so much, there's so much that you could discuss or you could talk. So Don broke that down. And now Sohan Fan and Eric Humig of Tea House Ghost, and then also your YouTube channel in conjunction with many others. I think what it is as opposed to there being competition, the point was not to say who could do it better, but where is one area that perhaps Don didn't cover or go into in the way that I could, or the way that my friend could. And then that opened the discourse for everyone to then join the discussion and to start with Don's format, tweak it a little, and then make it their own so that everyone could have the opportunity to better understand their place within tea culture. So it's not about just heaping all the praise on Don, but it's that Don essentially is one piece of the puzzle that was started by this wonderful culture that was already there, but it just made it more translatable. And so that's really what's going to be indicated here is that the main facet of this is communication. Once the doors opened, many other channels came in to help to provide their own unique take and to the benefit of everyone that now they had access to all these wonderful resources, all these wonderful teas, and it made Gongfu Cha just as accessible as coffee and
Yeah.
just as relatable as coffee culture. And so, and that's really the beauty of it, is not to lift people onto a pedestal, but to really realize that that tea culture is what we need to be understanding, and the historical significance of it
I mean,
and the transparency of it.
there is like in any industry, there's competitiveness in tea. Like I don't think that would be too surprising to anybody in a realistic sense.
Mm,
But out of like, and I've worked in food industry, I've worked in government, I've worked in all different. It was a photography and videography and all ends and little pockets of that, and easily I can still say that tea has been overwhelmingly more positive about welcoming other, like one tea shop, like another tea shop doesn't open, and then like a new tea shop opens, the existing tea shop doesn't automatically look at that and go, oh god, look what they're doing, I did this first. And it's not about doing it first, and it's not about copying. Like I think you were talking about it with the videos, is that it's make it, as long as you can make it you, then you can be in this industry. And when I was looking, when people said they wanted me to start doing videos outside of Instagram, and I was like, well, I have the skills, I have the equipment, but I was like, what I said was, but what can I offer that Don May isn't? And that's not to say he's the end all. It's not to put him on a pedestal, but it's just to say he's covering this, in my opinion, so damn well that I don't feel like I can outdo that, or nor should I want to. So it was just, okay, then let me find my way and figure out what voice I have and how that is could be viewed as different and therefore valuable to people. And that's how this podcast got it. It was Instagram Live has become very hard to do, but this talking back and forth I really love to do. So it was like, okay, then let's translate, let's evolve. And I guarantee you that Don May didn't see me starting a podcast and go, oh, that Unity guy, or like, or it's very weird like that. I would say that honestly, people cause or stir up more of that stuff than the industry people do. Like when Don came out with his first Japanese black tea, I had a lot of people that were like, "Oh, did you see Don now has it?" Because I had carried, I think just a year earlier, I started carrying Japanese black tea. But a couple people were like, messaged me in like the form of, "Hey, are you upset about this?" And it was like, why would I be upset about it? There's zero malice. It's a different cultivar. It's from a different producer, from a different area. His brewing parameters are different, and he's a different. His taste buds are different than mine. So
Exactly.
why would I be, if nothing else, it's more interesting for me as the vendor to have you taste that and then compare, like tell me, oh, I tried that new May Leaf black tea. I really liked it. It had this really nice floral presence that I didn't notice with yours, but I found it really pleasant. Then I can go, oh, that's interesting. Huh, I'll have to, in the future, I'll have to kind of just keep my eye open for a floral presence. It's just like, it's not like a, oh, how do I outdo him, or no, it's just I always see it as a chance to just learn something more about yourself and more about the process of tea tasting in general.
Yes, I think if there's one thing we can agree on is there's always going to be some degree of connoisseurship and competition amongst people. But at the same time, the wonderful thing about tea is is that it really capitalizes on conversation because you need time to wait for the leaves to open, the infusions change. Someone is ultimately serving you tea. And so the idea of being served, it's very hard to be angry when you're being served a delicious cup of tea and being treated with immense kindness and generosity. Even if the person feels very confident about their tea skills. If the tea is a little bitter, or if it's not very good tea, you still appreciate that they offered you that tea. And so when someone offers you coffee, it's not that it's I think that there's a similarity when you're being offered a cup of coffee. It's still warm, it's enjoyable. And the thing is, so I think anything that involves a warm beverage, anything involving a warm beverage, I almost went down like where I would have gone is I would have said tea over coffee, but no, I'm not at that point anymore.
No, you hit onto a much richer point in that you're right. It's not necessarily the beverage at that point. It's the gesture of the beverage, and that beverage is chosen because in that scenario it offers aid.
Yes, exactly. And so the competition can still be there among specific things, but as you said, when tea houses exist near each other, they each offer their own unique offerings. They each have their own unique offerings and their own unique appreciation for that craft. And so because of that, you'll learn something different from said individuals.
And the competition, if you look at it the right way, competition is wonderful motivation.
Mm.
Like, not if, again, not if, I guess, if there's malice involved, but if it's just another vendor releases a really interesting tea and a lot of customers are like, ooh, instead of getting upset about that or seeing it as like a, oh, they one upped me, it's just sort of like a, oh, that's really interesting. People are really interested in that. Like, if nothing else, just to further your own tea education, just go, huh, well, let's see what's up with that. Like, and it doesn't mean that you find something like it, replicate it, and copy it, but it's like maybe that would somehow influence you to try something you wouldn't have and ended up with something beautiful that you wouldn't have prior.
That's really well said. And I think you're right in that competition is an inherently human trait,
Yeah.
but it can be a seed of consciousness. When we feel it, we realize there's something we're passionate about. It actually caused us to emote. So we must have really cared about what was being indicated. And because of the intention of tea, which is to share, it kind of transforms what would have choked out that seed into something that can then spread. And ultimately, it can kind of climb the lattice, if you will, and it can reach other flowers, other people. And so, illustrating it is that competition can be one of the things that spark things. but it's not what ends the conversation. It really can be a start, but the intention changes.
But among among the different industries that I've personally experienced and worked in, I again will state that my overall experience, like to a very top 99 percentage, has just been overwhelmingly welcome and warm and encouraging. And this is from people of all statures in the tea business. It's just if you're just an honest person looking for an honest connection and to talk about tea, and you find another person who, then you'll make a friend. It's very very welcoming more than other communities, and I think that's something that is the tea community's sort of mission, is that we should start finding ways to help influence communities outside of tea to start adapting some more tea like uh,
Mhm.
teachings.
Right. And I think that's the term, is that tea embodies what human beings can do well, and that's adapt. We may be afraid of change,
Mhm.
but we've been experiencing nothing but change, and everyone responds to it differently. And normally change requires abrupt shifts. Like, but then, and a lot of people, they say, no, I don't want to do that. It's too quick. But tea kind of helps you to integrate slowly into that space. There's a gentle thing. You may be introduced to something that you don't like, trying a green tea. You think, oh, it was very bitter when I tried to make it myself. But then when it's made for you, then all of a sudden it slowly but surely, that shell begins to slowly open. It may not open completely, but it let there's a little tiny opening. And that alone in and of itself is the strength of the concept of tea. I found is that it's not expecting you to change, it's inviting you to change. And not because someone told you, it's because you personally felt something that inspired you to look within yourself and ask the question. And that can happen over the course of a year, over the course of like a decade, over the course of a lifetime. It's an ongoing thing. And that's the beauty of tea, is it's not asking you to be anything. It's just asking you to ask the question.
Yeah. And like you, I know you found out that how it once a couple of years ago, when we were first getting into tea, the thought of getting a group of people together and sitting down and sharing gong fu, and tasting tea and sharing around in a circle what we experienced, that felt like a nice pipe dream. But again, you fast forward to today, and you mentioned earlier Sohan, and if there's nothing you could ever give Sohan credit for, you would have to give him credit that his ability to pull people together in Texas of all states, like one of the warmest states, he was able to start and then grow this beautiful community of people that, like we're saying, they were once people who were just listening to him and taking all his teachings. Now they already are turning around, and now they're starting these circles, and it's that trickle down effect is like one of the most beautiful signs ever, because it shows the direction tea's going in. And
Mhm.
it's, I truly do believe there'll never be gong fu in every home, but I truly believe that the more honest uh, ingredient tea is being sought out more. Even the more general consumers are starting to say, well, I want to be drinking stuff that's better for me, and I know tea is supposed to be one of these things, but I go to the store and all I see is Arizona green tea that's got 80 grams of carbohydrates, and they're like, well, that's, if I'm a diabetic, that's not really good for me. So unfortunately, what do I do? But now there are more people that are using less sugar in the drinks that they're making. Like I've noticed iced tea, like bubble tea places, over just even the last 3 years, they have cut back, at least locally, I can talk, have cut back the amount of sugar they use significantly, as they
Mm.
should have, but it shows that at first they thought they had to. They thought this is what the Americans want. They just want sugar. That's not what we want. We want a good beverage. If there's a little sugar in it, okay. But if it's a good beverage and there's no sugar in it, okay. Like it's we just I think Americans are just like we're more like we just want a good product.
Yes, no, that's a really good point, Jeff, because we're realizing, I think we are, in some cases, even subconsciously realizing that there's a way to have a healthier beverage and there's a way to have healthier food while taking more charge over what we ingest. And I think businesses are slowly starting to see that. And while that's a conversation in and of itself pertaining to industries and companies and global avenues, I think on a local scale, we can see how small changes are being made and really small consciousness. And I think a lot of that can be tied to small batch, tied to the fact, we look at the fact that we need to eat healthier and we feel better when we do, but we still want to eat good food, natural beverages. And all of that lends itself toward the discussion of how can we do that and still enjoy wonderful food with the people that we love. So yeah, no, it just goes to show you that tea is not on its own island, that the mindset expands to multiple strata within multiple industries. And I think regardless of if you say it's competitive or it's this or it's that, the conversation is occurring during a global pandemic when we ultimately have time to contemplate on these things. And we realize that there needs to be a shift, whatever that looks like to people. At least we're having the conversation. And we definitely, I think amongst the tea people, or I say tea people, but tea community, I like to say, because it's not only the tea area that's having this discussion, but yeah, no, that's well said, is that we're beginning to gain a different consciousness and we're having the conversation. And that's how I think things can shift slowly and eventually begin to grow into something more comprehensive. So as long as we're having the discussion, that's the most important thing. So I agree with you on that front.
And on that note, we just came up to our time. So I think it was actually a very good time for it to reach, because it was sort of we had really made a nice little full circle. So if people want to get more in touch with you, what's the best ways to get in touch with you?
The best way is my Instagram, which is Nuev underscore Orden, NUEV underscore ORDEN. And I put my travels in China there to Yunnan, to Shanxi, to Beijing, and many other locations that taught me a great deal. Talking about tea, talking about life, talking about even what led me to what I'm doing now, which is teaching somatic tea courses and intuitive writing, which is predicated on breath work. I'm offering those from time to time, but my page deals mostly with writing, emotional appreciation and openness and discussion in conjunction with having tea with people so that we can make this more apparent within everyday life. And so also I post a lot about the technique of pottery and the technique and the chemistry and the geology of clay. And so I discuss that quite a bit as well. So you can go there to my page, or you can also go to my Facebook, which is J Shiloh Gastello. And that's a space that you can go to, but I post to both areas on a regular basis. So I love to share other people's pages. I love to share resources. So come join the conversation. And thank you, Jeff, for
Awesome.
continuing to be you, my friend, and we'll continue to be us, and we'll just continue to share. And I think that that's the best thing that we can do right now.
That sounds like one good plan. Thank you again, and I'm sure people will reach out. If you guys have any questions or further questions, just leave them in the comments below, and either John or I will be able to answer them for you. But otherwise, John, thank you again. Uh, it's always good to talk with you, my friend, and it's so nice to have you in so early in on the podcast. So we'll definitely have you in again, and we'll maybe choose a real targeted topic to dive into. But I figure you're such an interesting guy yourself that it'd be good to just to get an introduction of who you are if they don't already know. So beautiful, my friend. We will be in touch shortly. Thank you, and keep being you.
It sounds like a plan, my friend. Thank you, everyone.